Before we begin, a warning. Malicious Follows is not a tale of celebrity gossip. It's the anatomy of a meltdown. A televised collision between two worlds, one built on laughter, the other fueled by confrontation. And it all unraveled in a studio where the lights were warm, but the intentions were anything but. Sentenced interviews begin with smiles. This one began with miscalculations. Rifles. Rowan Atkinson. Yes, that Rowan Atkinson entered the studio of The View holding the kind of quiet grace only a man who has made the world laugh for over 4 decades could possess. Fists, there was nothing dramatic in his walk, nothing unusual in his expression. A simple smile, polite nods. Just a man here to talk about his work. He didn't know he was stepping into an ambush. Because seated across from him sat Joy Behar, a woman who had made a career out of confrontation. Migration who believed provocation was courage. Seizing a woman who, on that morning, had convinced herself she was about to expose something the rest of the world had apparently missed for 30 years. The audience didn't know any of this. They were cheering, clapping, waiting for a few laughs, maybe a charming story or two. They weren't prepared for what they were about to witness. Frankly, neither was anyone else. Rowan took his seat, adjusted his tie, not out of discomfort, but habit. He sat with the posture of a scholar, not a performer. Germpelent's eyes, light smile, a presence so calm it could lower the heart rate of an entire room. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, Alyssa Farah Griffin, each with their cue cards in hand, offered polite greetings. And for a moment, everything looked normal. Then Joy Behar leaned forward. Her smile wasn't warm. It wasn't even neutral. It was the smile of someone sharpening a blade behind polite conversation. "So, Rowan," she began, her voice oiled in false casualness, "I've been revisiting some of your work this morning." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Rowan recognized the tone immediately, confined the tone of someone who wasn't seeking clarity, presumption, but preparing a prosecution. Now, Rowan stayed poised. "Of course," he replied softly. "What would you like to talk about?" Joy inhaled, not dramatically, but with the certainty of someone about to drop a grenade. "Well," she spoke the sentence that froze the entire room. "Your character, Mr. Bean, he's basically mocking people with disabilities, isn't he?" The silence didn't follow. It collapsed on the room. Even the cameras seemed unsure whether to keep rolling. A question like that isn't a question. It's an accusation wearing a thin mask. And in that instant, the interview was no longer an interview. It was a trial. The audience shifted in their seats. Alyssa lowered her cue cards. Missel's eyebrows disappeared beneath her glasses. Even the floor manager, off camera, paused mid-gesture as if waiting for someone to call cut. But nobody did. Rowan blinked, once, slowly. Not out of confusion, but calculation. He had spent years navigating fame without scandal, decades avoiding the circus of American daytime TV combat. He knew traps when he saw them. "I'm not sure I understand," he replied calmly. "Would you elaborate?" Remorse smirked. Her shoulders rose with the confidence of someone who believed they had just cornered a global icon. "Oh, come on, Rowan," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Pension's the character barely speaks. He acts confused, childlike, socially unaware. It's 2024. We don't make fun of vulnerable people anymore." There. The accusation stood naked, a blade laid gently on the table. Rowan didn't flinch. Crimson, but something subtle shifted in his eyes, an almost imperceptible sharpening, like a camera lens focusing before a critical shot. Whoopi exhaled, stepping in instinctively. Trespass. Joy, maybe we should, Joy snapped. Let him answer. Simmons, it was no longer about the question. It was about dominance, authority. A performance staged not for understanding, but for takedown. The audience's excitement was gone. Missiles by the electric tension of unpredictability. Jang that a single wrong word could ignite the entire room. Rowan sat up straighter. Missed defensively. Purposefully. His follow with the calm precision of someone who understood the gravity of defamation and the absurdity of it. Mrs. Behar, he began, using a formality that immediately shifted the power dynamic. I believe you misunderstand the essence of physical comedy and the character entirely. Trembling. His wasn't anger. This was clarity. And clarity, in moments of chaos, is its own form of power. Barr wasn't listening. She wasn't here to understand. She was here to expose, even if what she was exposing wasn't real. Oh, spare me the lecture, she snapped. I've seen the show. It's obvious. It was a line spoken not from insight, but from assumption. The most dangerous weapon in modern media. Rowan watched her. Imprisonment, but with the heartbreaking disappointment of a teacher witnessing willful ignorance. The road waited. Every camera, every breath. And Rowan finally responded. Not with volume, salmon, not with aggression, but with a dignity so sharp it cut through Joy's performance like glass. Rowan Atkinson did not raise his voice, fishing he didn't need to. When a man of his intellect chooses restraint over rage, the room leans in without being told. He kept his hands folded, a posture not of defense, but of discipline. The kind of discipline that comes from decades of building a legacy brick by brick, laugh by laugh, across borders where language never mattered. Perhaps, he said quietly, we should examine the premise of your accusation. Joy Behar smirked again, but it was thinner now, forced. A smirk that needed reassurance, as if she realized, too late, that she might have mistaken poise for passivity. Relics Roundon continued, each word landing with the precision of a surgeon. Childlike wonder, he said, is not a disability. Curiosity is not incompetence. Physical comedy is not an attack. The audience exhaled since the confrontation, and in that breath, something shifted unmistakably. Marlins Atkinson was no longer the guest. Crimson, he was the authority. Collins tried to interrupt, but Rowan held up a single finger. Not aggressively, but decisively. The gesture of someone who had been patient long enough. Let us consider something that every physical comedian in history, Chaplin, Keaton, Tati, was mocking the vulnerable. The trap was reversed, quietly, effortlessly. Because for Joy to maintain her claim, she would have to accuse the entire foundation of visual comedy, something she was never prepared to do. Her smirk wavered. Her lips parted, closed, then parted again. A glitch in confidence. Crimson. A tell. Mehmet glanced at the producers, eyes wide, silently asking, "Are we really doing this live?" Rowan leaned forward slightly, his voice no louder but infinitely sharper. Mrs. Behar, when you interpret innocence as insult, that reveals far more about your lens than my work. A ripple spread through the audience, an almost physical reaction. Sentencing some leaned forward, some covered their mouths. Some looked at Joy as though expecting a rebuttal that never came. Joy scoffed. Jimmy was a brittle sound, a bridge cracking under weight. "Oh, please," she snapped. "At least Chaplin said something with his work. Mr. Bean is just mindless slapstick." And there it was. Fishing. Pensions. The contempt. The belief that complexity only counts when wrapped in dialogue and American sensibilities. Rowan didn't react with anger. He reacted with history. "Mr. Bean," he said softly, "has spoken to children undergoing chemotherapy, to refugees learning English, spinach to entire communities who cannot read or write. Spinach, yet they laugh, not because they see mockery, but because they see humanity." Joy froze. It was the first line she had no comeback for. Miss Sarah Haynes shifted uncomfortably. Plumbing looked down, avoiding Rowan's gaze entirely. Spinal, the cameraman, steadied his shot as if unwilling to miss a second. But Joy pushed forward. Cornered animals do. "You're deflecting," she snapped. "You think being British and educated makes you immune to criticism?" It was a swing, and a wild one. Missed the kind of argument thrown not to win, but to survive. Crimson Rowan's eyes narrowed, only slightly, but enough. A man who rarely used his full gravity now allowed it to fill the space. "Mrs. Behar," he replied, "I have never believed I was immune to criticism. But I do believe criticism should be rooted in understanding, not projection." Temperature in the room dropped. Temperature in the room dropped. You could feel it. A collective cooling. A realization spreading across every face in the audience. Joy hadn't brought a critique. She'd brought an assumption. And that assumption had just collided with a man who spent his entire life studying nuance. Joy opened her mouth. No words came out. Not yet. "So Rowan, my work of cruelty. Yet every day on this show you reduce public figures, politicians, celebrities, ordinary people to punchlines based on their appearance, their personal struggles, their missteps." That was the first time Joy flinched. Misinformation, but visibly. Her chin pulled back, her shoulders tightened. Her reflex, like touching a bruise someone unexpectedly pressed. Sarah let out a quiet, involuntary oof. It wasn't judgment, it was astonishment. Rawson wasn't just parrying anymore. He was striking back, with facts, not fury. "You say I punched down," Rowan added softly. "But your entire persona, Mrs. Behar, is built on the confidence that you, on national television, may punch in any direction you please." Blitz snapped. Simulations. She had to. "Don't you dare judge my career," she barked, volume rising, authority slipping through her fingers like sand. Rowan didn't flinch. "Why not?" he asked. "You've spent the last 10 minutes judging mine." The tension snapped like a wire. The room went silent, relinquish silence that only happens when truth is stated without hesitation and cannot be refuted. In silence, Joy Behar realized something she hadn't expected when she asked that first question. She was no longer the interviewer. She was the one being interviewed, judged. Salmon, measured, engines, unfortunately, found lacking. Rowan leaned back, calm as ever. "But perhaps," he said, with the gentlest finality, "what troubles you is not my comedy, but your inability to understand a form of joy that does not need a target." Joy's breath caught. Salmon. A sharp inhale. Immigration. Dylan audience looked from one to the other like spectators in an arena where the match had suddenly become historic. The clash it over. In fact, the real explosion was still to come. If the first half of the interview felt like a spark, What happened next was the wildfire. Joy Behar, red-faced now, leaned forward with attention so tight it pulled the entire table with her. She wasn't just offended anymore, she was cornered. And in her cornered state, she reached for the oldest defense a shaken host can grab. Volambia. "Oh, give me a break," she shot back, voice raised, tone trembling between anger and insecurity. "You're twisting this. I am asking questions. Questions that need to be asked." "You're the one playing the victim here," the audience murmured. Not loudly, but enough. Because they knew, everyone knew, this wasn't a question anymore. This was Joy trying to regain control of a narrative she no longer held. Rowan remained still. He didn't blink rapidly. He didn't fidget. His hand stayed folded gently on his knee. So unshakable, it made Joy's agitation look even more chaotic. Misinformation, such emerged low, steady, unwavering. "Mrs. Behar, nothing about my response indicates victimhood. What it indicates is boundaries." Joy scoffed audibly, but the sound wavered, uncertain, instinctively defensive. She opened her mouth, but Rowan didn't give her the chance to fill the air with volume again. "And since you insist on a conversation about ethics," he continued, "let us have one honestly." Alyssa's head snapped up. Whoopi froze, pressed her lips together, bracing. Everyone in the room could feel the shift. Rifles Atkinson was no longer merely defending his legacy. He was dissecting the moment. Live. Unfiltered. Fearlessly. "Every morning," Rowan said softly, "you sit in that chair and comment on the world. Salmon, you comment on politicians, on celebrities, on people who cannot answer back because they're not sitting here across from you." Joy's jaw tightened. "You call that commentary. You call it honesty. But if I use exaggerated body language to create humor, you call it cruelty." Joy's hands curled on the table, a defensive posture. The kind people default to when confronted not with insult, but with evidence. Rowan tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Tell me, Mrs. Behar," he asked, "why is your satire acceptable, but mine is immoral?" Jeff inhaled sharply. Her eyes darted briefly toward Whoopi, looking perhaps for support, or an escape route, or even a commercial break. But Whoopi didn't move. She didn't interfere. This wasn't her moment. This was a reckoning between two very different philosophies of public discourse. Joy straightened. Her voice dropped lower now, quieter but sharper. "Because my job is political commentary," she said. "Yours is entertainment. We are not the same." Rowan nodded once. A gesture of acknowledgement, but also one of profound, quiet disapproval. "Ah," he murmured. "There it is." The audience leaned in. He had said it like a revelation, like a truth finally uncovered. "You believe," Rowan continued, "that commentary built upon mockery is noble, while laughter built upon innocence is shameful." Joy slammed her palm on the table. "Oh, stop twisting my words!" Didn't raise his voice. He didn't even move. "But I'm not twisting them. I'm reflecting them back to you." His tone carried no malice, only clarity. "And if the reflection displeases you," Rowan added, "perhaps it is the image you should examine, not the mirror." The audience reacted audibly now. Gasps, hands over mouths, even a few impressed murmurs. Joy Behar, veteran host, professional provocateur, looked momentarily stunned. But only momentarily, because ego is a powerful engine, and Joy's was revving. "Oh, so now I'm the villain," she shot back, voice cracking slightly. "Is that it? I'm the bully and you're the poor misunderstood genius." Rowan's eyes softened. Rifles, not with pity, but with something much more devastating. Understanding. Emissions. "No," he said quietly. "You are not a villain." Joy froze. But you are, Rowan continued, a person who has confused provocation with courage. And those two things are not the same. That line hit her harder than any insult could have, because it wasn't cruel, it wasn't disrespectful, it wasn't even angry. It was accurate. Joy's shoulders stiffened, her breath quickened. Her eyes flashed with the panic of losing the room, losing the narrative, losing control. "You think you're so above everyone," she muttered. "You think just because you speak softly, you're the smartest person here." Rowan looked genuinely puzzled by that. "No," he replied. "I think because I listen. I understand the conversation I am in." Whippy tried again. "Okay, maybe we should—" But the tension had moved beyond moderators. This was now a philosophical duel. Joy leaned in, desperate for one last foothold of control. "You're avoiding the real issue," she said. "You're refusing to admit that your character plays into stereotypes, that it makes fun of people who struggle in society." Rowan's response came slowly, not cruelly, not defensively, but with heartbreaking sincerity. "Mr. Bean," he said softly, "was created to honor the childlike parts of humanity, not to mock the fragile ones." The room's energy shifted once more. Gone was the battle. Gone was the hostility. For a moment, dissatisfaction, the truth of that statement, hung in the air like a fragile, glowing thread. Joy swallowed hard. Flooring something in her expression revealed that she had not expected sincerity. Shimmer had prepared for defensiveness, for guilt, for a flustered explanation, not for truth. And truth, when spoken without aggression, is the sharpest blade in any confrontation. Rowan continued. "Breached if people see vulnerability in him," he said. "It is because they project their own fears onto him. But his purpose, loss, his entire essence, is joy." Joy's eyes flickered, and for a split second, doubt crossed her face. Silence, actual doubt. Because deep down, even she knew, aggression she built this entire confrontation on, was shaky at best. But pride is stubborn.
She spoke weren't born from reason, but from panic. "Well," she snapped, "it isn't funny anymore." It was the weakest punch she had thrown all morning. And Rowan saw it. He saw the desperation behind it, the loss of footing, sentenced for a position she no longer held. And that was when Rowan's expression changed. Not to anger, sentencing, but to something infinitely more powerful. Resolve. He sat up, straightened his jacket, crimsoned his head with the poise of a man who had carried a global legacy on his shoulders for decades. "Not funny anymore," he repeated quietly. The room inhaled. Remember to say the line. Corrections that would change the entire course of the interview. "Not funny anymore." Rowan repeated the phrase softly, not as a question, not as a challenge, but as if he were examining something fragile, pensions and profoundly disappointing. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, nostrils flaring with defensiveness. Xiaomi believed she had landed the final blow. She believed she had punctured his composure. She hadn't. Rowan lifted his gaze, and in that moment, something changed in his demeanor. It wasn't anger. It wasn't outrage. It wasn't even hurt. It was purpose.
The kind of purpose that belongs to someone who has spent decades honing not just a craft, but philosophy. Plumbing next wasn't retaliation. It was revelation. It's fascinating, Rowan began quietly, that you believe laughter expires simply because you choose to stop understanding it. Joy's eyes narrowed, a reflex, the body bracing before the mind even registers the impact. Rowan continued, each word deliberate. Across the world, in hospitals, in refugee centers, in homes where language is a barrier, Mr. Bean remains a universal comfort. Not because he mocks weakness, but because he reminds us of innocence. The audience absorbed every syllable. You could practically hear hearts adjusting their loyalties. Rowan leaned forward just enough to command the room without dominating it. But you, he said gently, see mockery, calibration, have trained yourself to look for cruelty. Jay jolted, a small movement, barely noticeable. But to a performer like Rowan, it was everything. The sign that the argument had landed perfectly. He wasn't attacking her. He was exposing the lens through which she viewed the world. A lens built on conflict, on assumption, missions rather than curiosity. Joy fought for footing. That's ridiculous, she snapped. You're putting words in my mouth. Rowan shook his head softly. No, he replied. I'm highlighting where your questions originate. Joy's face flushed. Don't psychoanalyze me, she hissed. Rowan's voice remained calm, almost serenely so. I'm not analyzing you, Mrs. Behar. I'm analyzing the framework you've brought into this conversation. He paused, and the room tightened like a drum. You didn't come here to understand my work. You came here to dismantle it, not out of concern, but out of habit. Silly slammed her palm onto the table again, the second time in minutes. Enough! But the slap sounded weaker now, less authoritative, more desperate. Signing column continued, uninterrupted. Fireplace, he said. I have been fortunate enough to bring joy to millions. Misses who do not share a language, misses who do not share a culture, people who find comfort in simple, universal humor. Shields his eyes on hers. And today, you tried to reduce all of that to an accusation. Joy opened her mouth to interrupt, but Rowan kept speaking. He had found his momentum now. Not loud, restless, Nick, but tidal. And when the accusation didn't hold, he said, you shifted to something else, dismissing my entire body of work as tired. Rowan swallowed hard. And that, Rowan continued, reveals the truth of this exchange. The audience leaned in. The issue was never the character, never representation, never ethics. He paused, long enough for the silence to become weight. The issue, resentment. Joy stiffened. Resentment, Rowan repeated, toward a form of comedy that does not need cruelty to survive, toward a character beloved by generations, toward a man who does not play by the rules of American confrontation culture. Joy's lips trembled. I don't resent you, she said, but the tremor betrayed her. Rowan nodded gently. Perhaps not consciously, but you resent what I represent. Joy blinked rapidly, a sign of emotional overload, and Rowan, without raising his voice, delivered the line that sealed the dynamic entirely. You believe that sophistication is measured by sharpness of tongue. I believe it is measured by softness of heart. That followed wasn't applause. Not yet. It was awe. Because the entire studio realized something at the same moment. Rowan Atkinson was not dismantling a person. He was dismantling a worldview. Joy struggled to maintain composure. "Oh, please," she snapped weakly. "You're making yourself into some kind of saint now." Rowan's expression softened, limbs deeply. "No," he replied. "I'm reminding you that comedy does not need a villain to have value." The statement dropped like a stone in a still pond. Ripples, reverberations, shields in perspective. Joy broke first, her voice raised out of panic rather than power. "You think you're so noble? You think clowning around for laughs is on the same level as political commentary?" Rowan inhaled slowly, reinforces as controlled as his craft. "My work," he said, "exists to bring people together." He gestured lightly toward the audience. "Yours exists to divide them." Joy froze. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation, missions, a truth stripped of hostility. And that's what made it devastating. Joy's fell, the kind of fall that happens when a truth hits too close to home. "Now, just a minute," she tried, but Rowan cut her off, sentencing, titanium, silence. "Mrs. Behar, the children who watch my work, the families who gather around it, the people who escape their hardships for 20 minutes because of it." He paused. "They find joy, peace, relief." He tilted his head. "Can you say the same about what happens here? Every morning?" Selfish silence followed. Tennis mouth opened, shall words emerged. Whoopi's face softened with something like sadness. Salmon exhaled sharply. Larry lowered her gaze. Spinal. The audience? Crimson. Silence. Spinal. Rowan leaned back. Calm. Measured. Finished with this particular thread of truth. Joy, desperate, fired the only shot she had left. "You are unbelievable," she spat. "You think you're better than this show?" Rowan shook his head gently. "No. Missing is simply different." And then, with the quiet confidence of a man who did not need to defend himself further, he stood. Not abruptly, not theatrically, but with dignity so precise it felt choreographed. Every eye in the room followed him. Every breath held. Silence, every assumption shattered. The moment was here, signaling the interview would turn from confrontation into something unforgettable. Rowan didn't storm out. He didn't shout. He didn't rip off his microphone like a celebrity throwing a tantrum. No, he did something far more powerful. He simply stood there, calm, tall, composed. The kind of composure that comes only from a man who knows the weight of his integrity and refuses to let anyone drag it through the mud. Joy Behar stared at him, her confidence evaporating by the second. Shattered outrage. She'd expected outrage. She'd expected defensiveness. She'd even expected a meltdown. She had not expected dignity. And dignity, right now, was the most threatening thing in the room. Rowan's voice, when it came, was softer than ever, but each syllable struck with surgical precision. "Mrs. Behar," he said, "I did not come here to engage in hostility. I came here to share my work, my craft, my joy." Jung swallowed acknowledged, hard. Her throat bobbed with the obvious effort of maintaining composure. But what I found, Rowan continued, was not curiosity, only condemnation. The audience shifted, not out of discomfort, but out of realization. They were witnessing not just a clash. You truly believe, Rowan said slowly, that my life's work, bringing laughter across borders, across languages, across generations, should be reduced to accusations of mockery? He lifted the microphone cord in his hand, held it lightly between his fingertips. Then I see no value in remaining here. Joy's eyes widened. It wasn't fear of losing the argument. That ship had sailed 10 minutes ago. It was fear of losing control of her show. Oh, so you're gonna run away? She snapped. The words came out too fast. Sember, Shane. A last-ditch effort to wound before he walked. Rowan's reply was devastating in its calm. I am not running, he said. I am refusing to participate in cruelty disguised as conversation. A collective "oh" rolled through the audience. Slamming, mocking, misinformation, silence. Because they felt it. Crimson wasn't clever. It was true. Whoopi finally stepped in, raising her hands. Rowan, please, this isn't how it's supposed to go. And here, for the first time since the confrontation began, Rowan's expression softened. Not for Joy, but for Whoopi. With the deepest respect, he said gently, I know you did not intend this. The kindness in that single sentence hit harder than any insult could. And because of that, Rowan continued, I owe you honesty. He turned to the camera now, his posture immaculate. Ointment, missing, misinformation, prison commanding. For anyone watching, he said, who has ever smiled because of my work, please know this. It was created with love, with wonder, with a belief that innocence still exists, even in a world determined to bury it. Simmons. Silenced. Patience old in the studio hung on his words. Comedy should not divide us, Rowan said. It should remind us of our shared humanity, our shared absurdity, our shared need to laugh. He faced Joy once more. Pensions, not with anger, with truth. And if you cannot see that, he said softly, then I truly hope one day you learn to. Joy stood frozen, arms crossed, jaw tight, but her eyes shimmered with something she couldn't hide. Salmon, self-doubt. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Rowan placed his microphone gently on the chair. Not dropped, not tossed, like someone returning a fragile object they refused to break. The entire studio held its breath. Rowan final nod to the other hosts. Respectful. Warm. A quiet thank you to the few who hadn't turned the interview into a spectacle. Then he turned toward the exit. He walked with poise, with grace, with a dignity so profound it made the exit feel less like a walkout and more like a statement. The audience reacted first. A slow ripple of applause turning into a roaring ovation. Missiles, not for drama, not for spectacle, but for a masterclass in composure. Joy Behar stood motionless as Rowan disappeared behind the curtain. Her face was a canvas of shock, embarrassment, and the crushing realization that she had not defeated him. She had revealed herself. The cameras stayed locked on her. For once, even her co-hosts didn't rush to defend or soften the impact. Whoopi exhaled. Sarah looked down at her hands. Alyssa blinked rapidly, as if trying to process witnessing something historic. And Joy, the head created. Because for the first time in her long career, shall had lost an argument not to anger, but to dignity. The applause kept rising, growing, shields, sustaining, a tribute not to confrontation, slashing, but to grace. And as the show rushed to a commercial break, everyone watching knew they hadn't just seen an interview gone wrong. They had seen a legacy defended with precision, intelligence, and unshakable principle. Atkinson did not win by fighting. He won by refusing to become what he was accused of. And sometimes that is the most cinematic victory of all.